Biography of Nelson Mandela. Chapter 1. Early Life. Nelson Mandela was born on July 18, 1918, in a small village called Mvizo in the Eastern Cape province of South Africa. His birth name was Relila Mandela, which means pulling the branch of a tree or troublemaker. He belonged to the Thembu royal family, and his father was a chief. His mother, Nosekini Fanny, was the third wife of his father. He grew up in a rural village with his family and lived a traditional African life. When Mandela was 9 years old, his father passed away. After his father's death, Mandela moved to the town of Kunu, where he was raised by the Thembu regent, John Taba Dalanjibo. Mandela attended local schools and learned to speak English. As a young boy, he enjoyed playing games with friends and helping with chores in the village. Mandela's education began at a Methodist school, where he was given the name Nelson by his teacher, a common practice in those days. He was a good student, and his teachers noticed his intelligence. He eventually moved to Heldtown, a Methodist secondary school, and later attended Fort Hare University and the University of Witwatersrand, where he studied law. Chapter 2. The Struggle Begins. In the early 1940s, Nelson Mandela became involved in the political movement in South Africa. At this time, South Africa was ruled by the apartheid system, which legally separated black people from white people and treated black people unfairly. Mandela joined the African National Congress, ANC, in 1944, a political party that fought for the rights of black South Africans. In 1948, the South African government introduced apartheid, a system that made it illegal for black people to live in certain areas, go to certain schools, or even sit next to white people in public places. Mandela was deeply upset by this, and he and other ANC leaders began organizing protests and strikes against apartheid. He became a prominent voice in the struggle for equality. Mandela worked as a lawyer in Johannesburg and became well known for his involvement in the fight against apartheid. He helped defend black people who were treated unfairly by the legal system. He was also involved in organizing boycotts and protests to challenge the government. His determination and leadership made him a target for the government, and he was arrested many times for his involvement in the anti-apartheid movement. Chapter 3. The Defiance Campaign. In 1949, Mandela and other ANC leaders launched the Defiance Campaign, a movement aimed at resisting apartheid laws through acts of civil disobedience. People were encouraged to defy apartheid laws and participate in nonviolent protests. Mandela was deeply involved in organizing these actions, and he quickly gained a reputation as a strong and fearless leader. In 1952, Mandela became the national volunteer-in-chief for the ANC's Defiance Campaign. He traveled across South Africa, encouraging people to take part in protests and strikes. His efforts helped to raise awareness about the injustice of apartheid and made the ANC a stronger political force. However, the government responded by increasing arrests and imprisoning those who opposed apartheid. During this time, Mandela also began working with other organizations to build a broader alliance against apartheid. He helped create the Congress of the People, which brought together a wide range of political and social groups, including the ANC, trade unions, and religious groups. This alliance played a key role in the fight for equality and justice in South Africa. Chapter 4. The Rivonia Trial. In 1961, the ANC became more militant in its fight against apartheid, and Mandela began to support the use of armed resistance. He helped form a group called Umkhonto we Sizwe, Spear of the Nation, which carried out acts of sabotage against government buildings and infrastructure. The government, determined to stop the resistance, began to arrest ANC leaders. In 1962, Mandela was arrested for leaving the country without permission, and in 1963, he was put on trial for his role in organizing the resistance. During the Rivonia trial, Mandela and his co-defendants were charged with sabotage and plotting to overthrow the government. The trial became a key moment in the anti-apartheid movement, and Mandela used the trial to publicly speak out against apartheid. In 1964, Mandela was sentenced to life in prison for his actions. He famously said during the trial, "I have fought against white domination, and I have fought against black domination. I have cherished the ideal of a democratic and free society in which all persons live together in harmony and with equal opportunities." He was sent to Robben Island, where he would spend the next 18 years in prison. Chapter 5. Life in Prison. Mandela spent 18 years on Robben Island, a small prison off the coast of Cape Town, South Africa. He was kept in harsh conditions, forced to work in a lime quarry, and often denied access to visitors and books. Despite this, Mandela never gave up his fight for freedom and equality. He continued to inspire other prisoners and his supporters on the outside. During his time in prison, Mandela became a symbol of resistance to apartheid. His courage and determination made him one of the world's most famous political prisoners. People around the world called for his release, and many protests were organized in his name. While in prison, Mandela continued to communicate with ANC leaders and helped to shape the strategy of the anti-apartheid movement. In the 1980s, international pressure on the South African government to end apartheid grew. Countries and organizations around the world imposed sanctions on South Africa, and anti-apartheid activists held rallies and marches calling for Mandela's release. Mandela remained steadfast in his commitment to a non-racial, democratic South Africa. Chapter 6. Release and Negotiations. In 1990, after 27 years in prison, Nelson Mandela was finally released. His release was a result of growing international pressure and changes in South Africa, where the government was beginning to recognize the need for reform. Mandela was greeted by thousands of people in Cape Town, and his release marked a turning point in the struggle against apartheid. After his release, Mandela worked with the South African government to negotiate an end to apartheid. He helped lead talks with the ruling National Party and other political groups to create a new, democratic constitution for South Africa. Mandela's leadership and ability to forgive those who had wronged him played a key role in the peaceful transition from apartheid to democracy. In 1993, Mandela and then South African President F.W. de Klerk were jointly awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for their efforts to end apartheid. The award recognized their work in bringing about a peaceful resolution to the conflict and building a new, democratic South Africa. Chapter 7. Becoming President. In 1994, South Africa held its first multiracial elections, and Nelson Mandela became the country's first black president. His election was a historic moment, symbolizing the end of apartheid and the beginning of a new era of democracy and equality. Mandela's presidency was marked by efforts to heal the divisions created by apartheid and to create a more inclusive society. Mandela's presidency focused on reconciliation and nation-building. He worked to unite South Africans of all races and backgrounds, emphasizing forgiveness and understanding. He also focused on addressing the social and economic challenges faced by many black South Africans, including poverty, unemployment, and lack of access to education and health care. Mandela served one term as president and chose not to run for a second term, believing that leadership should be passed on to younger generations. After stepping down from the presidency, he continued to work for peace and human rights, both in South Africa and around the world. Chapter 8. Legacy of Peace and Reconciliation. Nelson Mandela's legacy is one of peace, reconciliation, and justice. His leadership in the fight against apartheid, his ability to forgive, and his commitment to building a democratic South Africa have made him a global icon. Mandela showed the world that it is possible to achieve peace even after years of conflict and division. Mandela's work extended beyond South Africa. He became a global ambassador for peace and human rights, speaking out on issues such as poverty, HIV/AIDS, and conflict resolution. He supported peace efforts in countries like Burundi and the Democratic Republic of Congo, and his work inspired leaders and activists around the world. In 2009, the United Nations declared July 18th as Nelson Mandela International Day, in recognition of his contributions to peace and social justice. Mandela's message of hope and unity continues to inspire millions of people worldwide. Chapter 9. Personal Challenges. Throughout his life, Mandela faced many personal challenges. His long years in prison were a difficult time, and his family suffered as a result of his absence. He was also deeply affected by the loss of his son, Thembi, in a car accident in 1969. Despite these personal tragedies, Mandela remained committed to his cause and focused on the larger goal of ending apartheid and building a free South Africa. Mandela's health also became a concern in his later years. He battled several illnesses, including a respiratory infection that led to multiple hospitalizations. Despite these challenges, Mandela remained active in public life and continued to advocate for causes he cared about, including education and HIV/AIDS awareness. Mandela's personal life was also marked by the end of his marriage to his first wife, Evelyn Mays, and his second marriage to Winnie Madikizela, who was also a prominent anti-apartheid activist. In 1998, he married Graca Machel, the widow of the former president of Mozambique. He enjoyed his later years with his family and continued to be a symbol of resilience and hope. Chapter 10. The Legacy Lives On. Nelson Mandela passed away on December 5, 2013, at the age of 95. His death was a sad moment for South Africa and the world, but his legacy lives on. Mandela's contributions to peace, equality, and justice continue to inspire people worldwide. Mandela's life is a testament to the power of forgiveness, determination, and hope. His story shows that even in the face of hardship, it is possible to make a positive change in the world. As the world continues to face challenges, Nelson Mandela's example reminds us of the importance of standing up for justice and working towards a better future for all. Today, statues, schools, and museums around the world honor Nelson Mandela's life and work. His legacy is a beacon of hope for those who fight for freedom, equality, and human rights, and his example will continue to inspire future generations.